Right, good morning, everybody. Stories are one of the major ways in which teachers convey their teaching uh, because they're so memorable. We remember these stories, and I'm going to just give you a number of stories from different religious traditions. Um, Sometimes you will be able to identify which tradition it's from, and sometimes you won't be able to do that. And I think the importance of that is that we can use them from each other's backgrounds, from each other's faiths, whether it's Islam or Christianity or Buddhism. So the first story is a parable that I've put into verse. A man of some means invited some friends to share in a feast his cook prepared. The cook gave a shout, the servants went out to tell the favored guests, the meal is served. I have to confide, the first man replied, then I must decline, no disrespect. I've just bought some land, and he'll understand that it is something I must now inspect. The next man replied, I must take a ride to see my new car is running right. I'm sure he won't care if I can't be there, so tell him I will come another night. The third man replied, I can't leave my bride, for we married earlier today. Now he'll understand that we both had planned to spend our time tonight another way. This man of renown invited the town to dine on the feast his cook prepared. The blind, lame, and poor converged on his door, and to these hungry guests the meal was served. And of course, the spiritual meaning of that is that when the message comes, when the invitation comes, we have to respond immediately. It is something so important that it can't wait. We can't say, I'll wait until I retire and then I'll meditate because I'll have more time. I mean, if the invitation comes, then we must respond. Now, food and banquets are something which storytellers are very fond of. Here's another one. A prince ordered the royal kitchens to prepare the choicest dishes for a banquet for a holy man, a sheikh. Invitations went out to all the dignitaries in the town. A large carpet was spread out and the sumptuous dishes were arranged with regality. The prince greeted the sheikh and seated him at the head of the table. When the banquet was over, the prince waited for a compliment and asked him, Sir, how was the food? The sheikh smiled and said, Oh, for the banquet of Shiraz. This baffled the prince, who thought his meal had not been good enough. So the next time he got bigger and better dishes and spared no efforts to provide a better meal. And after this meal, he asked the sheikh, How was the food, sir? And the sheikh exclaimed, Oh, for the banquet of Shiraz. Well, it happened again, a third time. And the prince asked the same question, How was the food, sir? And the sheikh replied in the same way, Oh, for the banquet of Shiraz. The prince was completely frustrated. He wanted to know the secret of the banquet of Shiraz. And he said, I've served the best dishes prepared by the most celebrated chefs on plates of gold and silver. What is it about the banquet of Shiraz that is better than this? My prince, replied the sheikh, the perfect banquet is one that does not inconvenience either the host or the guest. The banquet of Shiraz is one where the host and the guests say grace together and partake of whatever is available in the house. There is no showmanship, no pomp, and no glitter. As the Quran says, verily, Allah does not love those who waste. So that's a rather different take on the meal. But here's another one. This is another version of that first one that I told you. What's quite interesting about the parables in the Gospels is that Mark was the first Gospel that was written, and Matthew and Luke both take material from Mark, and then some they leave out and some they add to. And the fact that they have added to what Mark has said means that the parables must have had an independent existence, because they mention they put in their account some parables that are not in Mark, and sometimes details are changed and emphasis is changed. Anyway, here is another one about the wedding banquet. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who'd been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused. Then he sent more servants and said, 'Tell those who've been invited that I've prepared my dinner. Everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find.' So the servants went into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests." Now, up to there, it's fairly similar to the first one that I read. But then another parable is added to it. "But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, 'How did you get in here without wedding clothes, friend?' The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness. For many are invited, but few are chosen.'" And this second parable about the guest who is not wearing a wedding garment, it really illustrates the idea that not only must we have an invitation, but we must be ready and prepared to meet that invitation. We have to clear the decks, or we have to put on the right wedding garment. But in the Islamic tradition, a lot of stories are told about Nasruddin, or the Hodja, who is a semi-humorous character. And here is a story about the way in which he attends a banquet. He heard there was a banquet being held in a nearby town and that everyone was invited. He made his way there as quickly as he could. When the master of ceremonies saw him in his ragged cloak, he seated him in the most inconspicuous place far from the great table where the most important people were being waited on hand and foot. Nasruddin saw that it would be an hour at least before the waiters reached the place where he was sitting. So he got up and went home. He dressed himself in a magnificent sable coat and turban and returned to the feast. As soon as the heralds of the Amir, his host, saw his splendid sight, they started to beat the drum of welcome and sound the trumpets in a manner consonant with a visitor of high rank. the chamberlain came out of the palace himself and conducted the magnificent Nasruddin to a place almost next to the emir. A dish of wonderful food was immediately placed before him. Without a pause, Nasruddin began to rub handfuls of it into his turban and cloak. "Your Eminence," said the prince, "I'm curious as to your eating habits, which are new to me." "Nothing special," said Nasruddin. "The cloak got me in here, got me the food. Surely it deserves its portion." When a fault finder asked the Buddha why he failed to give the secret of salvation to everyone, the Buddha suggested the man go from door to door to find out what people wanted most out of life. On the man's return, the Buddha asked what he had discovered. Their wishes are for power, fame, wealth, beauty, popularity, happiness, love, good health, long life, and such things. "Did any wish for the secret of salvation?" the Buddha inquired. "No one," the man replied. "Then how," the Buddha asked, "shall I force on them what none wants?" And so, I mean, that really ties in with the other ones, with the invitation. Some don't respond to the invitation. Some don't understand what is being asked. Let me go through a few more little stories, because if, like me, you enjoy stories, you will enjoy these. A truth seeker, after years of search, met a smiling old sage seated in a mountain cave. Books were everywhere. "These," the sage explained, "are the secret volumes which contain the sum of all human wisdom. Each seeker may have one. Which do you wish for?" And the truth seeker, surveying how endless the number of them seemed, at last replied slowly, "Only that book, sir, which can teach me all that the others contain." "Such a book exists," the sage said, and then, smiling with a wise sadness, handed the truth seeker the Book of Doubt. "Laws as such do not make people better," said Nasruddin to the king. "They must practice certain things in order to become attuned to inner truth. This form of truth resembles apparent truth only slightly." The king decided that he could and would make people observe the truth. He could make them practice truthfulness. His city was entered by a bridge. On this, he built a gallows. The following day, when the gates were opened at dawn, the captain of the guard was stationed with a squad of troops to examine all who entered. An announcement was made: "Everyone will be questioned. If he tells the truth, he will be allowed to enter. If he lies, he will be hanged." Nasruddin stepped forward. "Where are you going?" "I'm on my way," said Nasruddin slowly, "to be hanged." "We don't believe you." "Very well, if I have told a lie, hang me." "But if we hang you for lying, you will have made what you said come true." "That's right. Now you know what truth is, your truth." Many of the Buddhist stories come from the Zen tradition, have a Japanese background. Yamoka Teshu, as a young student of Zen, visited one master after another. He called upon Dakuan of Shokoku. Desiring to show his attainment, he said, "The mind, Buddha, and sentient beings, after all, do not exist. The true nature of phenomena is emptiness. There is no realization, no delusion, no sage, no mediocrity. There is no giving and nothing to be received. Duquan, who was smoking quietly, said nothing. Suddenly he whacked Yamaoka with his bamboo pipe. This made the youth quite angry. If nothing exists, inquired Duquan, where did this anger come from? Another one which I like is a wise man was walking out and he saw a young girl with a candle. And he said to her, "Tell me, where does the light come from?" And the girl blew out the candle and said, "If you tell me where it's gone, I'll tell you where it comes from." What is interesting to me about Tai is that the story, he doesn't use these sorts of parables. His stories come from life, things that he has experienced, which he turns into stories. And the one I remember best is that when he and his companions were asked to, were told to leave Vietnam and given 24 hours to do so, they, very worried, asked him, "What should we do? What should we do?" And he said, "Meditate." For 24 hours, I think they meditated. Now, following that Zen one about anger, a Zen student came to Bankai and complained, "Master, I have an ungovernable temper. How can I cure it?" "You have something very strange," replied Bankai. "Let me see what you have." "Just now I cannot show it to you," replied the other. "When can you show it to me?" asked Bankai. "It arises unexpectedly," replied the student. "Then," concluded Bankai, "it must not be your own true nature. If it were, you could show it to me at any time. When you were born, you did not have it, and your parents did not give it to you. Think that over." Well, how are we doing in terms of time? Because there are plenty more stories.
Colin, if you would like to invite any questions, then maybe another couple of minutes, and then we would have about 10 minutes or so for questions.
Okay, another. Yes, there's one here. It's well worth looking for the Hodgetts stories or Nasruddin stories, because there are some quite amusing ones. But this Islamic story I would like to finish with. In a mother's womb were two babies. One asked the other, "Do you believe in life after birth?" The other replied, "Why, of course, there has to be something after delivery. Maybe we're here to prepare ourselves for what will be later." "Nonsense," said the first. "There is no life after delivery. What kind of life would that be?" The second said, "I don't know, but there will be more light than here. Maybe we will talk with maybe we will walk with our legs and eat with our mouths." The first replied, "That's absurd. Walking is impossible. And eating with our mouths, ridiculous. The umbilical cord supplies all the nutrition we need, and the umbilical cord is so short, life after delivery is to be logically excluded." The second insisted, "Well, I think there is something, and maybe it's different than it is here. Maybe we won't need this cord anymore. The first replied, nonsense. And if there is life, then why has no one ever come back and told us? Delivery is the end of life, and in the afterlife there is nothing but darkness and silence and oblivion. It takes us nowhere. Well, I don't know, said the second, but certainly we will meet Mother, and she will take care of us. The first replied, Mother? You actually believe in Mother? That's laughable. If Mother exists, then where is she now? The second said, she's all around us. We are surrounded by her. We are of her. It is in her that we live. Without her, this world would not and could not exist. Said the first, well, I don't see her, so it's only logical that she doesn't exist. To which the second replied, sometimes when you're in silence and you focus and listen, you can sense her presence and you can hear her loving voice calling down from above. I like that story. I mean, I like a lot of these stories, but let's have a conversation.
Colin, thank you. And I hope you can send us the references, because we will send the recording of the talk and out as a follow-up to this morning, so that people can find the stories themselves, if that's all right. That's not too much trouble.
No, the trouble is the stories come from a number of different sources, so that you wouldn't be able, unless you have the books, you wouldn't be able to look them up.
Well, even the titles and maybe the
Yes,
tradition,
I can.
and then we can Google.
Well, I'll give you, what I can do is to give you the titles of the books, because they all contain a lot of stories. But I can give you the references for the Jesus parables.
Whatever you've got time and
because they'll be in every Bible, so
okay.
that's easy. But the Zen ones and they come from a couple of different sources, and the Buddhist ones come from the internet. So that's
okay. Well, whatever you think.
I'll make some suggestions anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
As to where you could look.
So we invite you to ask any questions you'd like. You can either do it live or put something in the chat. And as always, if you have a burning question that there isn't time to give an answer to, then you can always email plumvillage.uk. I think feedback@plumvillage.uk will do. And we'll field them on to Colin for an answer if we can't give it ourselves.